Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline from KnittingHouseSquare and today I have a fun knitting tutorial for you. So I'm going to be taking you through all the steps you need to create this braided twisted knit ear warmer. So what I'm going to be taking you through is first everything you need from the cast on to the cast off. So we'll start with the backward loop cast on. Then we'll introduce in how you read a cable chart for flat knitting. So this is a nice pattern if you're introducing yourself to cable charts for the first time. So we'll read a cable chart for flat knitting, we'll work all the way up through the ear warmer, and then at the end I'll show you how to create a simple little twist at the end, just to add an extra fun little detail. The other nice thing about this tutorial is it's part of a 4-part series that I'm coming out with here on my channel, and this will be the first one. So we have an ear warmer, then we have a set of mittens with the same braided cable pattern on it. We have a cowl. Again, same braided cable pattern. And then there's also a hat. So that way you can mix and match and create whichever parts of the set that you'd like. These are all knit out of worsted weight yarn. And if you're interested in these other tutorials, keep an eye out for them coming up in the next few weeks on my channel. Again, we're starting here with the ear warmer because this one's knit flat. And then as we move on to the other 3 pieces, these are all knit in the round. So I'll be demonstrating in these videos how to read a cable chart in the round. So we'll start off with the materials, and the full written versions of these patterns are all available on my website, KnittingHouseSquare.com. Let's get started. First up, the materials for this project. You're going to want some worsted weight yarn. So the worsted weight yarn I have here, I purchased off of Etsy, and this is the same yarn that I'm using in all of my woven cables designs. So that is the hat version. This yarn is by Crow & Crescent, and this is the Meridian colorway. Again, it's worsted weight. So what you're looking for, if you're looking for a comparable yarn, is the word worsted, medium, or number 4. The yardage you're gonna want to make this ear warmer is I used about 70 yards or 64 meters of worsted weight yarn. Along with my worsted weight yarn, I'm going to be using a US 8 knitting needle, and this is knit completely flat, so you can use circular or straight knitting needles. I just have a lot of circular knitting needles, so I tend to knit my flat work on circulars. It doesn't matter though. Then you'll want a cable needle. I like metal cable needles, so this is one of the ones I'll be using. I do tend to lose them a lot though, so I'm kind of always switching out the cable needle I'm using. I prefer metal ones, and I'll link to some options on Amazon down below as well. And last up, you'll need a big tapestry needle. Some other materials that are good to have handy, a pair of scissors, and then also a tape measure to measure our work as we go along. So to start, what I have in front of me before I cast on is I have a printed cable chart here. That way I can highlight as I go across each row. I have some yarn and I have my knitting needle. So to start off, we're gonna wanna cast on 21 stitches. And you really can use any cast on method you'd like. I'm gonna use probably the backward loop cast on is my selected option here. So the way that starts is it starts with a slip knot. So I'm gonna lay my working yarn over my left hand. Ball is further away, tail is closer. And I'm gonna grab onto that strand with my bottom 3 fingers. Then I'm gonna take the strand, go back behind down to the bottom, up the front to the top, back behind down to the bottom, up the front to the top again, back behind one more time. And I'm gonna grab onto that strand, again, both of them, with my bottom 3 fingers. Now to make the slip knot, all I do is I rearrange the second loop and the first loop. So I'm gonna take this second one that's kind of in the middle of my finger, and I'm gonna go up closer to the top of my pointer finger. Then I'm gonna take the new second loop, go up closer to the top of my finger. And then lastly, I'm gonna take the final second loop there, slide it off of my finger. Now when I'm looking at this knot, I'm gonna hold it and then just take one of my knitting needle points, and I'm gonna slip it onto my knitting needle point, going from the right over towards the left. And then you just gently pull on the yarn tail to get it to tighten. And you want it snug, but not too tight that you can't move it around, so I can easily slide it around on my knitting needle. Now to make sure I don't accidentally cast on with my tail, I'm gonna hold that tail and the knitting needle over here in my right hand, And then with my left hand, I'm gonna cast on. So this slip knot counts as the first stitch. So now I wanna cast on 20 more stitches to get the total of 21. So the way I'm gonna cast on, it looks similar to the slip knot. I'm gonna take my left hand, go behind the strand of yarn, grab onto it with my bottom 3 fingers, and now with my pointer finger of my left hand, I'm gonna go down below, up the front to the top, back behind down to the bottom, up the front to the top. And now I'm just gonna slip that loop off of my finger and onto my knitting needle. Now I need to make a new loop. So the way I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna take my finger behind the yarn, down below, then up the front to the top, slide that new loop off of my finger onto the knitting needle. Again, go back behind, down to the bottom, up the front to the top, off of your finger onto the knitting needle. If you ever accidentally let go, all you have to do is reset up. So you're gonna take your left hand behind again, grab onto the strand, and then loop your finger around twice this time. So go back behind, down the bottom, up the front. One more time, back behind, down the bottom, up the front. And then you can start slipping that top loop off and creating a new loop. So I'm going to continue this until the total number of loops, including my slip knot at the beginning, is 21. And I always double count just to make sure. Now that we've done the cast on, we're ready to start looking at that cable chart. Okay, so looking at this cable chart, the first thing to keep in mind is this cable chart is for flat knitting. So we're gonna read this cable chart differently than how we would read our cable chart for the woven cable hat, because this woven cable hat was knit in the round. So there's different strategies depending on how you're knitting. So how you're gonna read a cable chart for knitting flat is you're gonna start still at the bottom right corner, and you're gonna read your row starting over here at the right, going over towards the left. And when we look at this first row, this is gonna be what's called a right side row. I'll abbreviate that RS. So the way the boxes are gonna appear on this row is exactly how we wanna work them. So what I mean by that is any one of these white boxes is gonna be a knit stitch, and then any one of the gray boxes is gonna be a purl stitch. So if I read across this row, I'm gonna knit 2, then purl 1, then knit all these center stitches, purl 1, then knit the final 2. Now where it becomes a little bit different than knitting in the round is row 2. Now we're working across the back side of our work. So this row, we're actually gonna read from the left over towards the right. So first I just have the box with the S in it. That just means to slip the first stitch. And then there's 2 boxes that are gray. What those 2 boxes that are gray mean is that on the front side of my work, or the right side, I want them to look like purl bumps, but now I'm on the wrong side, abbreviated WS. So how do I make something look like a purl bump on the right side? I would knit it on the wrong side. So I'm actually gonna knit 2, so it's the opposite. Then I have a bunch of white boxes. So I want those white boxes to look like knit stitches on the right side, but I'm on the wrong side. So how do I make them look like knit stitches? I purl on the wrong side. Then I'm back over here where I want it to look like 3 purl pumps on the right side. So how do I do that if I'm on the wrong side? I would knit 3. So the wrong side switches the way each one of the colors work. So let's start with this first row down here at the bottom, because this one's definitely a little bit easier to read. We're working across row 1. And again, the white boxes are gonna be knit stitches. So we're gonna start off by knitting our first 2 stitches. So starting off here with row 1, I'm knitting 2, because each one of these boxes represents one of the stitches. Then I have a gray box. So a gray box on the right side means I'm purling. So I'm gonna bring my yarn to the front and purl. Now I have 15 white boxes. So I'm gonna knit the next 15 stitches. Then I have a gray box, so I'm gonna purl just one, and then my final 2 stitches are knit, so I'm gonna knit the final 2. Now when I turn my work, I'm gonna be ready to work across my first wrong side row, and now again, we're gonna be working from the left over towards the right. So first let me highlight my first row to show that I've completed that one. So on this side, the colors are switched. So if I want it to be a purl bump on my right side, what do I do with it on my wrong side? I'm gonna knit it. The first one though has an S in that, so all I'm gonna do for that one is I'm gonna slip the first stitch. And when I'm slipping on this purl side, I'm just gonna slip it with the yarn in front. And then I'm gonna take the yarn in between my 2 knitting needles to the back so that I can knit the next 2. Now I have 15 white boxes across the center. So again, I want those to look like knits on my right side. So on my wrong side, I'm gonna purl all 15 of those. Now at the end, I have 3 gray boxes. So I want them to look like purls on the right side, but I'm on the wrong side. So I'm gonna switch it and I'm gonna knit 3. Great. So now I'm gonna turn my work and I'm gonna highlight that second row that I did. Now next up, what you're gonna notice about rows 3 through 10 is they're all part of this repeat. So we're gonna work rows 3 through row 10 over and over again until we get the total length that we need for this ear warmer. So I'm going for a total length of 18 inches. So I'm gonna continue repeating rows 3 through 10 until it measures 18 inches. So that may change how you wanna highlight these as you're going along. But for now, I'm just gonna continue to highlight in my yellow color. So we just worked across the wrong side, going from left to right. So now for row 3, we're gonna be working across the right side again, going from right over to the left. So we can work these boxes kind of like the normal way. So a white box, because we're on the right side, is a knit. A gray box is a purl. The first one again has that S in it, so I wanna slip my first stitch. So again, this one starts off with an S at the beginning, so I need to slip my first stitch. And I'm just gonna do that again with the yarn in front. Once I slip it, my next one is a knit stitch. So I'm gonna bring my working yarn in between to the back, and then I'm gonna knit 1. And then next up, I have a gray box, so I'm gonna purl 1. Now my cables begin. So first thing you want to check when you're looking at a cable is how many boxes does the whole cable stitch take up? So this one takes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches. So it's going to be a 6-stitch cable. And these two are actually both 6-stitch cables. They're the exact same thing. We just repeat it twice. Next thing you want to figure out is how many stitches do you need to put on the cable needle? And do you need to put the cable needle in the front or the back of your work? So the way you figure that out is you look at this bottom right corner and you look at the line that's coming out of that bottom right corner. Does it go in front of the other shape or does it go behind the other shape? So in this case, this diagonal line goes behind the other shape. So we're gonna be holding our cable needle in the back of our work. If you look up here, for instance, in the bottom right corner, right, this diagonal line is going in front. So this one we would hold in front of our work. So we're holding behind down here. And then how many stitches do you want to hold behind? You want to count how many boxes before the other shape begins. So we have 1, 2, 3 that we're going to be holding behind. So I'm going to slip the next 3 stitches from my left knitting needle onto my cable needle, and I'm going to hold it in the back of my work. Now it's a 6-stitch cable, so I have to do the next 3 stitches for my left knitting needle, and I'm just gonna knit them. Then I'm gonna work the 3 stitches being held on the cable needle. So this one's a little hard to see because it just started off in the work, but what did we do? We moved 3 stitches across the front going from the left to the right, and thus we took the original 3 stitches over here on the right and we moved them behind towards the left. And that's exactly what we see in this image. The first 3 stitches are going behind to the left. The other 3 stitches are going in front towards the right. So now we have that exact same thing again. So I'm taking 3 stitches, holding them in the back, and then I'm gonna knit 3 stitches for my left knitting needle. Knit the 3 stitches being held on my cable needle. Now there's no more cables across this row, so I just have 3 white boxes. That means I'm gonna knit 3. Then I have a gray box, so I'm gonna purl 1. And then I have 2 white boxes, so I'm gonna knit 2. So now I've worked across row 3. Row 4, and you'll notice all of the even rows, that's gonna be worked across the wrong side. So now you wanna switch the colors in your head. So we start off with an S, so we're just slipping the first stitch. And when I slip it, let me just untangle this real quick. When I slip it, I'm gonna have my working yarn in front, just slip it purlwise, and then I'm gonna bring my working yarn to the back in between. So I have 2 gray boxes on the wrong side, so I'm gonna knit 2. Then I have 15 white boxes on the wrong side, so I'm gonna purl 15. Then I have 3 gray boxes on the wrong side, so I'm gonna knit 3. And turn my work. I'm gonna highlight that one. So rows 5 and row 6, those are gonna look like rows we've done exactly before. So they're gonna look just like rounds 1 and 2. Just make sure you're slipping that first stitch there. So just keep in mind as you're working these, right, row 5, we're working across the right side. So it's gonna be slip, knit, purl, knit 15, purl, knit, knit. Then when you turn your work for row 6, you're gonna be working across the wrong side. So you're gonna slip the first stitch, then you're gonna knit 2, then you're gonna purl 15, then you're gonna knit 3. So I'm gonna work through rows 5 and 6, and then I'll show you real quick in row 7 how we work the cable going the opposite direction. So now I'm up to row 7. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work up to where the cable pattern begins. So I have to do slipping my first stitch. So I'm gonna slip it with the yarn in front, bring the yarn in between the 2 knitting needles to the back. Then I'm gonna knit 1 for the white box there. And then I have a gray box, so I'm gonna purl 1. Then the cables don't begin yet, so I'm gonna knit 3. And now my cable starts. So again, this is a 6-stitch cable. And if I look in the bottom corner, right corner of this cable stitch, and I look at the diagonal line, This diagonal line is going in front. So I'm gonna hold my cable needle in the front of my work. And how many stitches do I wanna hold in the front? How many stitches does this box take up is 1, 2, 3. So I'm gonna take 3 stitches, hold them in the front, work 3 stitches for my left-hand knitting needle, and then come back and work the 3 stitches being held on my cable needle. So slip 3 on your cable needle, hold them in front, knit 3 from your left-hand knitting needle, then knit the 3 stitches being held on your cable needle. So what did I do there? And your cable should be a little bit more visible now, is I took 3 stitches in front going over towards the left-hand side. And that's exactly what's shown in this cable pattern. You'll see the exact same thing happens again. So I'm gonna take 3, hold them in the front of my work, knit 3 for my left-hand knitting needle, then knit the 3 being held on my cable needle. Now last up, I have a purl and 2 knits. So now, row 8, that's gonna be a wrong side row. So I'm gonna switch the colors and I'm gonna work it from left over towards the right. Row 9, right side row. So going from right towards the left and then switching again. Row 10, going from the left over towards the right. And once I go all the way up through row 10, then I'm just gonna start right back down here where this bold line is at row 3 and go all the way up through 10 again. And continue repeating those rounds or rows over and over again until your total length measures 18 inches, unless you'd like yours to be a little bit longer or shorter, just depending on the circumference that you're going for. I'm gonna continue for those 18 inches, and then I'll come back and I'll show you my cast off and how I seam it together. Now that I've gone a little ways too, I just want to mention one thing about slipping those stitches. So what it's doing at the beginning of each row is it's creating this really nice clean edge on both sides of your work from slipping the first stitch. So if you ever forget to slip your first stitch, it's going to look more like a little knot over on the side instead of like the nice, clean, almost like a little bit loose stitches that go up the side. So keep an eye on that and make sure you are remembering to slip the first stitch on each row. I've now finished going for those 18 inches and I'm ready to cast off. So first up, where did I stop in the repeat pattern? I stopped after row 10. So I did a cable, then I worked the 3 other rows after that. The other place you could stop is after row 6. So you do your row 6, which would have been 3 rows after the cable on the other side. So either row 6 or 10, and then we're ready to cast off. Now, working across, I'm just gonna do a simple cast off method. So first, I'm gonna slip the first stitch purlwise, and then I'm just gonna work knit stitches as I'm casting off for the rest of the row. So I'm gonna bring my yarn to the back, and next up, I'm gonna knit 1 stitch for my left-hand knitting needle. Now I have 2 over here on the right, so to cast off a stitch, I'm gonna use my left knitting needle to pick up the previous stitch or the one furthest away, and I'm just gonna slide it up over and off of the second stitch. So now I've cast off 1. Now I'm just gonna knit another stitch for my left-hand knitting needle. And now that I have 2 on the other side, I'm gonna use my left knitting needle to take the further right stitch, or the original one, up, over, and off. Just continue that again. So knit 1, take the previous stitch, up, over, and off, all the way across this edge. Okay, once I get to the final stitch, there'll just be one left over here on my right knitting needle. I'm gonna pull that larger, take out my knitting needle, and now I'm gonna cut my yarn. I'm gonna leave about an 18-inch tail here so that I can use it for seaming. And I'm gonna thread this yarn tail through that remaining stitch. Just gently pull to tight. So now we need to find a way to seam these two together. And there's two options for how I'd recommend doing this. You can either just take the two ends and kind of lay them flat, right? Put the right side down towards the table, fold them in towards each other, and then seam stitch by stitch from one side to the other. And that would be a great seam to use if you're planning on putting the seam in the back of your hat, so like underneath towards your neck. The other option is you can create a twist if you'd like to. So the way I would create a twist is you're gonna wanna lay your headband with the cable side up, and then you're gonna pick up the two ends and you're gonna fold them in half. So kind of pinch them together. Now you're gonna take the two ends and you're gonna lay them on top of each other. And once you've done that, you're gonna take your yarn tail and you're gonna seam all the way through all of this edge. So I'm gonna do it this way so you can see what the twist will end up looking like. Again, just to show one more time how I did that. I have the cables facing up. I take both the ends, I fold them in half, and then you just kind of layer those halves right on top of each other. And you wanna get them to be about equivalent across them. So sometimes I stretch them out a little bit just to make them lay nice and flat. So that looks good. Now I'm gonna take this long yarn tail real quick and I'll show you what I mean. I'm gonna put this on my tapestry needle and I'm gonna start seaming, and I just wanna make sure I'm picking up all of the layers as I go through. And then just go back the other direction. Again, making sure I'm picking up all of the layers. Now, once you finish seaming, before you tie a knot or anything, I would just flip it to the other side to make sure you like how your seam ended up. So when you flip it over, you can play around with your fold and you can see if you like how it looks. So if you're happy with how it looks, then you can go ahead and weave in your ends. But if not, you can always take out that seam and then try it again with the twist. So I like how mine ended up here. So all I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna weave in my ends. So I have a cast on and cast off end. And then I also ended up with two more where I switched balls of yarn. So I'm gonna weave all of those in. And then the other thing I'm gonna do is I am gonna block this. So I'm gonna soak it in some lukewarm water, then roll it up in a towel to get the excess moisture out, and then lay it flat to dry. And that'll really help even out the stitches. Thank you so much for joining me today as we created this braided cable ear warmer. And also, just as a reminder, this one's part of the set. So be sure to keep an eye out over the next few weeks for the mittens that match, the hat that matches, and also the cowl that matches. If there's any other projects you'd like to see with this braided cable design, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to get working on it.